J.M.W. Turner's seascapes, for example, demonstrate that things that exist in the world can often look abstract. But as the 19th century unfolded, with the Industrial Revolution and the invention of photography, life in European and American cities changed dramatically. Artists were increasingly interested in depicting things non-naturalistically, setting about abstracting things, i.e. starting with worldly subject matter but stylizing it, simplifying it, flattening it. By the 20th century, Matisse and André Derain were painting familiar things but in unfamiliar ways, using such intense colors and broad brushstrokes that a critic dubbed them the fauves, or wild beasts. Picasso and Georges Braque pioneered the Cubist style, painting much of the usual still life fodder but breaking it up into geometric shapes, fragmenting the picture plane, and showing multiple sides of a thing at once. Cubism simultaneously revealed more than what the eye could see, fusing multiple perspectives and moments in time, while also drawing attention to the flatness of the canvas itself. German expressionist Ernst Ludwig Kirchner used abstraction and rich, unreal colors to depict the chaos and anxiety of the city street. But while Mark pursued abstraction to connect with the natural world, Kandinsky's interest was to commune with the spiritual. He claimed his art was, quote, what the spectator lives or feels while under the effect of the form and color combinations of the picture. For Kandinsky, abstraction was not opposed to realism. It was realism. I mean, there are real things that can't be seen. After all, emotion and consciousness are realities, and maybe they could be painted too. Hilma af Klint was painting mostly abstract works as early as 1905. She was part of a group called the Five, who conducted seances to communicate with spirits through pictures. Klint's abstractions came from this interest in the spiritual and occult, as well as science, and the depiction of invisible forces like recently discovered electromagnetic fields, X-rays, and infrared light.
Cubism is often credited as being one of the most avant-garde, groundbreaking and revolutionary art movements. But what exactly is Cubist art, and who were the Cubists? The two most pivotal artists referred to as the inventors of Cubism are France's Georges Braque and Spain's Pablo Picasso. Back in the early 1900s, these two pioneers started to represent and depict their subject matter from multiple angles and viewpoints at the same time rather than from a single fixed position, which had been the norm prior to that. Despite the name of the iconic movement, neither Braque or Picasso ever painted cubes. The term itself actually originated from a derogatory remark made by an art critic in 1908. The critic had disparaged Braque by saying the artist reduced everything to geometric schemas, to cubes. The term soon became widespread. Cubism was born.
Expressionists aimed to show true emotions in their works, and those emotions were often scary, dark, worrying, and, well, not so positive. Expressionists also embraced printmaking, especially woodcuts. Prints were easier to distribute, so more people could see expressionist artworks. They also often portrayed nudes, but in a new, modern way. But expressionists wanted to show life as it truly was for them, a life filled with the anxiety and alienation present in the modern world. To expressionism in the visual arts, two groups of artists seem to be particularly important. Both were based in Germany, in Dresden, Munich and Berlin. These groups were known as the Blue Rider and the Bridge. The artists connected to these two groups defined the style of expressionism in art. The Bridge was founded by artists Carl Schmidt-Rottluff, Fritz Bleyl, Erich Heckel and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. The name of the group was taken from the writings of the famous German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously wrote, "What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end." And like in Kirchner's 1908 work Street Dresden, we see a crowded street city that screams intensity. And the bold colours Kirchner used helped make the scene seem even more extreme. The sidewalk is painted pink, and we can assume that it probably wasn't pink in real life. The same goes for the faces of the two women we see approaching. Their faces are green and orange, quite intense. Fauvism, and today we'll find out why this modern art movement is so special. Fauvism got its unusual name when the art critic Louis Vaucel described these artists as les fauves, meaning wild beasts. The art critic saw their works in an exhibition placed next to classical marble sculptures and called the scene Donatello among the wild beasts. And despite the fact that it wasn't a compliment he was giving them, the label stuck, and today we know these artists as fauvists. The best-known Fauvist art was created by three amazing artists, Henri Matisse, André Derain, and Maurice de Vlaminck. Fauvists ditched the realistic values and showed the colours they wanted to show, and not the ones you see in nature. Colour no longer had a representational purpose. The ways in which Fauvists used colour were inspired by the art of magnificent post-impressionists and neo-impressionists like Van Gogh, Gauguin, and Seurat.
Hi, I'm Jono, and if you're new here, I do pencil drawings. The criticism that hyperrealists often get is, what's the point of just reproducing something photorealistically and making something that just looks like a photograph, something that you could have just taken with a camera that would have been a lot easier and quicker to do, that could achieve the same effect. And this criticism is really valid. I used to stumble over it quite a bit and feel kind of really unsure about what I was doing with the genre that I loved and with the work that I was really drawn to, and I kind of couldn't really reconcile those feelings. Part of unpacking the genre for myself came from understanding where it originated. This fascination with the rawness of life dates back to the realism movement, which started in the 1850s. Realism was considered one of the first modern art movements and was revolutionary in its focus on the everyday lives of working class people. Instead of the highly controlled portraits that were favored at the time, realist artists began to paint the world exactly as they saw it. At the time, they were criticized for going out of their way to create unideal images, often with ugly colors, awkward expressions, and unflattering compositions.
Impressionism. Impressionist works were frequently begun, if not completed entirely out of doors. These artists used smaller canvases that were easy to transport and finish quickly before the light or weather changed. In France, where Impressionism was brewing, painting in the landscape was an established practice. Artists escaping Paris and political instability to observe nature and render it in a relatively lifelike manner. These artists also experimented with style and technique, trying out looser brushwork and brighter colors. But landscapes were considered to be genre painting, and less important in the eyes of the Academy, that more than nature valued the study of ancient Greek and Roman art. Figures were to be strongly defined and set amid ordered and harmonious compositions. This was the kind of subject matter favored by the Academy, pulling from history, mythology, and religion. They didn't want to see regular people doing regular stuff. The so-called realists had already challenged the Academy's values by painting scenes from contemporary life, sometimes admitted to the salon and sometimes denied.